The Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad was originally chartered in 1836 and eventually became a bridge line running between Richmond and Alexandria, Virginia, just across the river from Washington, D.C. The majority of southbound passenger trains from any railroad leaving Washington traveled at least some distance on the RF&P, and plenty of freight traffic traveled the capital city's route as well. At the end of the Second World War, the RF&P found itself in need of some beefier freight engines and happened upon another railroad looking to get rid of a few. In 1943, the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad received 6 Challenger-type locomotives that had been built to Union Pacific specifications. The War Production Board had diverted them to the D&RGW from a UP order to alleviate a slight motive power crunch. The engines, classified as L97s, were not well liked at all on the D&RGW. Once the war restrictions were lifted, all 6 were put up for sale. The RF&P chose to purchase 5 of them, while the 6th went to the clinch field. The RF&P would sometimes name their larger power to honor people and places in the state of Virginia. Virginia is often said to have more military academies than any other state when private and secondary schools are considered. The RF&P chose to honor those, and the Challengers became known as the Academies. Each engine was named after a military academy: number 700, Fork Union; number 701, Virginia Military Institute; number 702, Hargrave; number 703, Fishburne; and number 704, Massanutten. Later, the Clinchfield Railroad sold the 6th Challenger to the RF&P. This one received the number 705 and the name Virginia Polytechnic Institute. Allegedly, this was in part to put an end to the nuisance of tech fraternity brothers throwing footballs at the number 701, which was named after their primary football rival. The Academies were the RF&P's heavy freight hitters, and did very well on the RF&P's mostly gently sloping railroad. Without any mountains to climb, the big 4664s demonstrated just how capable superpower steam locomotives are at whisking a heavy load along with little effort once up to speed. The Academies remained in operation until 1955, when the RF&P sidelined their last steam locomotives. Number 700, Fork Union, was stored as reserve power while the remaining locomotives were cut up for scrap. Rumors persisted for years that 700 was still around, but even many RF&P employees weren't certain. In fact, number 700 remained in storage until the early 1980s, when a group of RF&P employees volunteered their time to quietly put in a new set of flues and do other mechanical work on the locomotive to get her running again. In 1991, a clandestine test run occurred on a double-stack train. The engine performed fine, and the RF&P began to plan excursion trips to launch their own steam program to one-up the Norfolk Southern steam program. However, the CSX acquisition occurred before any announcement could be made. The new management took a look at the proposals and said, "A steam what?" As the steam era wound down, the Smithsonian Institution approached the New York Central Railroad soliciting the donation of a 464 Hudson-type locomotive for display in a planned American History Museum. The Central was reluctant, but personal appeals to New York Central President Alfred Perlman were just barely able to convince him to okay the donation. Hudson 5438 was pulled from the end of a deadline in Chicago, Illinois, and ownership was transferred to the Smithsonian Institution from there. The Smithsonian arranged to ship the locomotive to Washington, D.C. The most direct route was via the Pennsylvania Railroad. The Hudson was sent across the Pennsylvania Railroad in a special hospital train. It quickly became a black mark for any crew that had to run it. Being seen crewing the train led to being the target of mockery and hazing from other Pennsylvania Railroad enginemen. Eventually, the Hudson made it to Altoona, Pennsylvania, where the crew claimed the bearings were running hot and that it needed to be inspected before going further. The Hudson was set out in a siding awaiting a spot in the Juniata shops to determine what, if any, problems there were with the bearings. The managers at Juniata seem to have forgotten about the Hudson, which is strange as it sat for an extended period outside a manager's office. While exactly what happened is still unknown, it is suspected the manager got sick of seeing it, as it was accidentally misrouted to a scrap track and cut up. When the Smithsonian inquired where their engine was, all the Pennsylvania Railroad could say was, "Oops." The PRR was planning on offering one of the locomotives out of their historical collection to replace it, but a New York Central employee, his cousins, and his godfather paid a PRR official a visit and put the kibosh on that plan. This left the Smithsonian with a large locomotive-sized hole in the museum they were planning to build. The hole would soon be filled by a generous donation from the Southern Railway, however. Innovation is as American as apple pie, as are the big questions. Not questions like, how do we keep good-paying jobs on the railroads? No, more like, why do we need locomotives when we have very big guns? Boomer LLC was technically headquartered in Silicon Valley, California, but no one really knew where their head office was. They had a big idea: eliminate the locomotive-hauled freight train and instead transport tractor-trailers on flat cars without a locomotive. Boomer's big idea was to use a giant cannon to launch the cars in the direction they're supposed to go and let the railroad dispatchers throw the switches to get the cars to their intended destinations. After acquiring a large piece of ex-U.S. Army railway artillery and leasing a few front-runner flat cars from the TTX Corporation, Boomer LLC did a few demonstrations of their concept in the early 2000s. No innovation will ever be without its minor problems, however. One of these was that the front-runner flat cars did not always properly activate railroad crossing signals. There were also a couple of minor derailments, resulting in the complete and total destruction of both trailer and rail car. Having trouble finding investors, Boomer LLC arranged for a last-ditch special demonstration of their concept. The launch went flawlessly. However, they lost track of the railcar after it left their site, and to this day, no one is really sure where it is. Investors were no longer interested, and Boomer LLC apparently went bankrupt sometime around 2005. I say apparently, as the owner appears to have moved to Brazil. That being said, the last car is still unaccounted for. If you happen to see a loose flat car and trailer hurtling down your local railroad main line, perhaps you should consider calling the blue sign on the nearest railroad crossing. Or if it has derailed and demolished a small school, perhaps call 911 instead.